My mom helped my dad steal $11,200 of my property to fund my brother's wedding, so I cut them off. But what I did next left their world shattered. I'm a 25-year-old man who grew up with parents who treated me like an inconvenience from day one. It was no joke. I felt like a non-player character in an epic adventure game, starring my younger brother Dylan, who is 24. Since I can remember, my parents made it painfully obvious that I was just their trial run at parenting, while Dylan was their actual pride and joy. The favoritism wasn't subtle. It was a full-on one kid gets everything, the other gets scrapped situation. When Dylan wanted the newest gaming system, my parents would camp outside the store to be first in line. I remember one Black Friday when they left at 1 in the morning to secure a PlayStation 4 for him, then made a whole ceremony of giving it to him. Meanwhile, when I needed new shoes because mine had holes, my mom told me, "Stop being so hard on your things." The worst part wasn't the material stuff. It was how they treated me like I was invisible or worse, a problem. My mom would shove me out of family photos to get one with just Dylan as if I was ruining the shot by existing. My dad referred to me as the other one when talking to his friends, saying, "Dylan's on the honor roll again and the other one's doing whatever." I had a name, but apparently it wasn't worth remembering. At dinner, Dylan got his favorite meals while I was told, "Eat what's on your plate or go hungry." If I didn't like something or wasn't hungry, I was ungrateful and difficult. But if Dylan didn't want what was served, my mom would jump up and make him something else. She would cook his favorite food even if it was at 1 in the morning. At my high school graduation, they showed up 30 minutes late because Dylan had a recreational soccer game that ran long. They missed me getting my diploma and giving my speech. Yes, I was salutatorian, not that they ever mentioned it to anyone. This was the pattern for my entire life. For birthdays, Dylan got weekend-long celebrations with friends. While I got a mumbled happy birthday if they remembered. For college, Dylan got a full ride paid by my parents. While I was told, college is overpriced anyway, and took out crippling student loans. That's not all, by the way, but you get the picture. Despite this, or maybe because of it, I worked hard to be self-sufficient. I juggled multiple jobs through high school and college, starting at fast food, moving to retail, then landing a decent office job during my junior year. I scraped by, paid my own rent, bought my own food, and maintained a 3.8 grade point average in computer science. My biggest achievement was saving enough to buy a used Ford F-150. It was nothing fancy, about 8 years old with 80,000 miles, but it felt incredible knowing it was mine. I found it on Craigslist, negotiated with the owner, arranged financing through my credit union, and made every payment on time. It took 3 years of monthly payments, but I paid it off last spring. That truck meant everything to me, not just as transportation, but because I had built something for myself. Meanwhile, Dylan was living his best life on our parents' dime. He dropped out of college after 3 semesters because the professors didn't understand his learning style. He couldn't hold a job longer than 3 months because managers were out to get him or jealous of his potential. At 19, he was still living at home rent-free with my parents doing his laundry and cooking his meals. The crazy thing is, I wasn't bitter about it for a long time. I accepted that they wouldn't change. I figured my parents had their favorite, and there was nothing I could do. I focused on building my own life, staying out of their way, and limiting contact to major holidays and occasional family events. I even tried to be cool with Dylan. It wasn't his fault our parents were the way they were, right? But he soaked up the special treatment and became the entitled jerk you'd expect. He'd borrow money from me and never pay it back. He'd mock my truck while driving the car our parents bought him. He'd belittle my lame job while having no job himself. I kept hoping that as we got older things would change. Maybe my parents would see I was doing well for myself while Dylan was still mooching off them. Maybe they'd realize their mistakes. Stupid, right? Some people never change, and my family proved that in the most messed up way possible. You might wonder why I still went to family events or tried to maintain any relationship with these people. Honestly, some twisted part of me still wanted their approval. Classic psychology. The ignored kid tries harder for attention. Plus, my grandparents were decent people I wanted to stay connected with, and family gatherings were the main way to see them. So that's how I ended up driving my beloved truck to my parents' house last Thanksgiving, about to get the shock of my life. Thanksgiving rolled around right after I returned from a week-long work trip. My company sent me to a conference in Chicago, and I hoped my parents might acknowledge it as an achievement. I left my truck parked at my apartment complex while I was gone, figuring it was safe. When I got back late Wednesday night, I was exhausted and crashed. Thanksgiving morning, I went to my parking spot to grab something from my truck and it was gone. My first thought was that it had been stolen. I spent the next 2 hours frantically calling apartment complex security, then the police, filing a report for a stolen vehicle. The cops said they'd look into it, but not to get my hopes up. Still dealing with this nightmare, I almost bailed on Thanksgiving dinner. I had my finger hovering over a text to make up an excuse about work or being sick, but for some reason, I convinced myself maintaining the relationship was important. They're still your family, I kept telling myself. What a joke that turned out to be. So I called an Uber to my parents' place, stressed about my missing truck, but figuring I'd deal with it after dinner. Dylan had recently gotten engaged to his girlfriend of 6 months, moving fast there, and I figured I'd be civil despite not liking her. This woman, let's call her Amber, came from serious money. She had that look rich girls get, like she's doing you a favor by acknowledging your existence. But whatever, not my circus, not my monkeys. As the Uber pulled up to my parents' house, I noticed something odd. Dylan and my dad were washing a car in the driveway that looked suspiciously like the one Amber's father drove. Great. The in-laws were already there. Walking into that house was like stepping into a bizarre alternate reality where I was the unwanted guest, rather than their actual son. "Where's your truck?" my dad asked casually as I came in, like he was just making conversation. I tensed up immediately. "Someone stole it. I just filed a police report this morning," I said, watching their reactions carefully. My mom and dad exchanged a weird look, and Dylan suddenly became very interested in his phone. "Well, that's terrible," my mom said, but something in her tone was off. Before I could press further, she bustled off to the kitchen saying dinner was almost ready. The meal was horrible as usual. Talk about the wedding. My dad loudly telling everyone how Dylan would be running his own company soon once he finds his path. I was distracted. Still thinking about my truck, I tried to mention the work conference I attended, an actual achievement based on merit. But my mom cut me off mid-sentence to ask Dylan if he wanted more stuffing. It was the same old routine I'd experienced my whole life, just amplified by Amber's presence. Then as they were serving dessert, my dad cleared his throat and looked at me with that smug face he gets when he's about to ruin my day. "About your truck," he said, "we should probably tell you that it wasn't actually stolen." I froze. "What do you mean it wasn't stolen?" My dad chuckled, like this was a joke. "We sold it while you were on your trip." My stomach dropped to the floor as I tried to process what I was hearing. "You did what?" I asked. That's when the whole story came tumbling out, each detail worse than the last. They had sold my truck, not just sold it, they had used the emergency key to my apartment, which my mom still had and I'd completely forgotten about. They broke in while I was in Chicago, stole the title from my filing cabinet, drove my truck away, and sold it without my knowledge or consent. Why? Because they wanted to surprise Dylan and Amber with a lavish wedding gift and needed quick cash. They'd promised to pay for a dream destination wedding and honeymoon in Cancun, but realized they couldn't afford it after putting down non-refundable deposits. So instead of admitting they'd overextended themselves or asking Dylan to scale back his plans, they decided stealing from me was the logical solution. "I filed a police report this morning," I said, my voice oddly calm considering my world was imploding. "God, do you not even feel bad about it?" My dad waved his hand dismissively. "It's okay. Just call them back and tell them you found it. No big deal." The way they explained it was so casual, like they'd done me a favor. My mom actually said, "That truck was too big for you anyway, and you were wasting money on gas." As if her opinion had any relevance to my vehicle that I bought with my money. Dylan sat there with a smug grin the entire time, like watching me get screwed over was the highlight of his Thanksgiving. He had the nerve to say, "You'll get over it, bro. It's just a truck." This from the guy who threw a tantrum when my parents got him the wrong color iPhone. I wish I could say I flipped the table, told them all to go to hell and stormed out dramatically. That's what they deserved. But I was so blindsided, so stunned by the magnitude of what they'd done that I just sat there quietly as my blood boiled. Then I asked, how the hell did they even sell it when it's not in their name? That's when they got uncomfortable. My dad mumbled something about still being on the insurance. I wasn't. I had my own policy. And my mom quickly changed the subject to wedding plans. I didn't make a scene or finish my food. I just got up, grabbed my jacket and walked out. No one tried to stop me. My mom called out something about don't be so sensitive, but I didn't turn around. I had to call an Uber since, my truck was gone. I spent the whole ride back to my apartment in numb disbelief, trying to figure out how they pulled this off legally. They thought they'd get away with this because of family. They thought I'd just take it. Like I'd taken every other unfair messed up thing they'd done my entire life. I was going to make them face consequences for once in their entitled lives. The next morning, I got up early and went into research mode. First call was to the Department of Motor Vehicles to figure out how they'd managed to transfer the title. Turns out, my signature had been forged on the title transfer. Not even well forged. It looked nothing like my actual signature. But apparently, the DMV worker hadn't bothered to verify it. My parents had waltzed in, handed over a title with a fake signature, and that was that. The truck had been sold for $11,200 in cash, way below its actual value of around $18,000 to $20,000. I'd paid $24,000 for it 3 years ago, kept it in perfect condition, and the market for used trucks was hot at the time. They'd basically given it away because they needed quick cash for Dylan's wedding. The DMV confirmed the new owner was some guy named Robert, my dad's poker friend who owned a local hardware store. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got the biggest slap in the face. While looking through my files for the original truck documentation, I noticed some credit card statements I didn't recognize. At first, I thought they were sent to me by mistake. They had my name on them, but the accounts weren't ones I remembered opening. I have exactly 2 credit cards that I use responsibly. I'm super careful. So, seeing these statements set off major alarm bells, I immediately pulled my credit report. You know that feeling when you think you're about to get punched, but instead someone hits you with a baseball bat? That's what looking at my credit report felt like. There were 3 credit cards and a personal loan in my name that I knew nothing about, totaling just over $35,000 in debt. Some charges went back almost 3 years to when I was in college. I almost threw up. The credit utilization was maxed on all the cards, minimum payments were barely being made, and there were late payments that had tanked my credit score. No wonder I'd been denied for an apartment I tried to rent a few months back. My credit was trashed and I hadn't even known it. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I called each credit card company, requested complete statements from when the accounts were opened, and documented everything. The paper trail was crystal clear. Addresses on the accounts were my parents' house, phone numbers were theirs, and even the email on one account was my dad's with my first initial added to make it look like mine. The purchases were insane expensive electronics, including a $1,200 gaming PC for Dylan Furniture, including a $2,500 leather sectional in my parents' living room, plane tickets, including 2 round trips to Vegas for my parents' anniversary, even a hot tub installed at their house last summer, which they told extended family was a deal they couldn't pass up. There were also charges from Dylan's favorite restaurants and gaming stores. But the most infuriating part? There were regular payments to Dylan's credit card bills. They were using fraudulent credit in my name to pay off Dylan's legitimate debts. It was a twisted financial shell game where I was the only loser. I found the loan documents too. A personal loan for $15,500 taken out in my name about 2 years ago. The signature was obviously forged, but no one had verified it. The money had been deposited into my parents' joint checking account. The reason for loan section listed emergency medical expenses, which was complete nonsense. No one in my family had been hospitalized or had major medical issues in years. I was beyond pissed. This wasn't just about my truck anymore. This was systematic identity theft that had been going on for years. They had been treating my identity and credit as their personal piggy bank while I worked hard to be financially responsible. It all made sense now. Every time I'd mention my good credit score, my dad would change the subject. When I talked about wanting to buy a house, my mom would say, "You should wait until the market cools down or renting gives you more flexibility." They weren't giving life advice. They were trying to keep me from discovering what they'd done to my credit. The worst part was realizing how methodical it had been. This wasn't a one-time desperate act. It was calculated ongoing fraud by my own parents against me, their son, while they spoiled Dylan with the proceeds. They started small with 1 credit card, and when there were no consequences, they got bolder. I dove deeper into the timeline and realized the fraud escalated significantly around the time Dylan got engaged. The personal loan was taken out 2 weeks after Dylan proposed, and a new credit card was opened the day after they announced the wedding date. They had been using my identity to finance Dylan's wedding and their promises to his fiancée's family. I organized everything into folders. 1 for the truck theft, 1 for each fraudulent account, 1 for the forged loan. I made copies of everything, documented dates, amounts, and specific transactions. I built a case so solid that not even the most family-oriented cop or judge could dismiss it. I also changed all my passwords, put freezes on my credit with all 3 bureaus, and set up fraud alerts. Then I changed the locks on my apartment. I wasn't taking chances that they might break in again and destroy evidence. My phone kept blowing up with texts from my mom asking why I'd left Thanksgiving early and if I was still being dramatic about the truck. My dad called once, leaving a voicemail saying we needed to straighten this out like men. Dylan sent a single text, "LOL. Did you seriously leave because of a truck? Grow up." I ignored them all. I wasn't about to tip my hand. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think they'd gotten away with it like they always had. By the end of that week, I had everything I needed, but I didn't go to the police right away. I wanted my parents and Dylan to know they couldn't mess with me anymore. I wanted them to understand that I knew everything and I knew exactly when and where to do it for maximum impact. My grandparents called for a family gathering and dinner at their house 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. They usually do that to keep the family connected. Everyone would be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole deal. I decided this was the perfect opportunity. I spent those weeks gathering and organizing every piece of evidence into a neat folder. When I showed up at the family gathering, my parents looked disgusted to see me. My mom rolled her eyes and whispered something to my dad, who snickered. I later found out they'd been telling everyone I was mentally unstable and making up stories for attention, and I definitely wouldn't be welcome. Classic move to control the narrative. I hung back, making small talk with a couple of cousins I got along with, biding my time. I wanted to wait for the right moment when everyone was together. That moment came after dinner, when people were mingling in the living room, high on food and family gossip. When there was a lull in the conversation, I stood up. "Since we're sharing big family news, I've got something everyone needs to see," I said. I handed out copies of my evidence packet to key family members, my grandparents, 2 uncles, and an aunt. "Mom and Dad have been committing identity theft against me for the past 3 years," I said, keeping my voice level. "They've opened multiple credit cards and a personal loan in my name without my knowledge or consent. Total fraudulent debt, over $35,000. They've also recently stolen and sold my truck by forging my signature on the title transfer. Everything I'm saying is documented in those folders." My mom immediately tried to interrupt, saying I was making things up. My dad attempted to pull me aside, hissing that this wasn't the time or place. Dylan just sat there looking like he was about to throw up, but I kept going, speaking louder to be heard over my mom's increasingly panicked denials. "The evidence includes statements for all the fraudulent accounts showing purchases that benefited them and Dylan. There's also proof they used these accounts to pay Dylan's bills and fund his wedding plans." The room got quiet as they started looking through the documents. My grandparents were shocked. One of my uncles said, "Jesus Christ," as he flipped through the pages, while my other uncle couldn't even look at my parents. That's when my dad tried a new angle. He stood up, trying to look authoritative, but coming across as desperate. "We were going to pay it all back," he said. "We just needed help during some tough times. The economy has been hard on everyone." I couldn't help but laugh, which made them look more frantic. "You didn't ask for help," I pointed out. "Asking for help would have involved a conversation where I had the option to say yes or no. What you did was steal from me repeatedly for years without my knowledge or consent. That's not family helping family. That's fraud." Dylan finally found his voice, though I wish he hadn't. "You're such a jerk," he spat. "You've always been jealous, and now you're trying to ruin my wedding and my reputation because you can't stand to see me happy." I turned to him, keeping my voice calm even though I wanted to punch him. "Shut up, Dylan. You're in no position to speak. You've been benefiting from their theft for years. That engagement ring on Amber's finger? Paid for with a credit card in my name. Those gaming systems in your room? The numerous times they've paid your bills? All with stolen money. You're as screwed as they are." I didn't need to say anything else. I walked out, leaving the chaos behind me. I had said what I needed to say, shown what I needed to show. The family would never see my parents the same way again, and that was enough for now. But was it the end? No. I wasn't done yet. As I was leaving, my grandfather caught up with me at the door. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had no idea. Whatever you decide to do next, you have my support." That meant more to me than he could know. I drove around for hours that night, processing everything. The weeks following that family gathering were absolute chaos. My phone blew up with calls and texts from every family member. Some were supportive, expressing shock, and offering help. Others were critical, saying I should have handled this privately and that airing dirty laundry at a family event was inappropriate. As if my parents stealing my identity and $35,000 was a minor disagreement that could be resolved over coffee. My uncle, the accountant, called first thing the next morning. "Kid, you need to file police reports yesterday. This isn't just about family drama anymore. Your credit is tanked and you're legally responsible for those debts until you formally report the fraud." He walked me through the process and offered to go with me to the station. Good guy. Dylan predictably went on the offensive. He called me every name in the book, saying I'd ruined his life and his relationship. Apparently, Amber was reconsidering the engagement after learning how the ring was purchased. He blamed me for this, of course, not the fact that he was wearing stolen goods. My parents swung between begging for forgiveness and threatening consequences. My mom would call crying one day, saying she only wanted the best for her boys and got carried away. The next day, my dad would leave voicemail saying I was no longer their son and that I would regret taking this public. It was emotional whiplash at its finest. The most telling thing, not once did they offer to pay back what they'd stolen or fix the damage to my credit. Their apologies were always about their feelings, their reputations, their pain. Classic narcissist playbook. Amid this chaos, I had serious decisions to make, plus the matter of my truck. The truck I had worked so hard to pay for, that represented my independence, that was mine. They had stolen it, sold it for a fraction of its value, and spent the money. That alone was enough to justify legal action. With my uncle's help, I filed police reports for identity theft and fraud. I also filed disputes with all the credit agencies and credit card companies, attaching copies of the police reports. The process was a nightmare. Hours on the phone with credit agencies, multiple visits to the police station, paperwork that never seemed to end. It took weeks to get the fraudulent charges removed from my credit report. And even then, the damage to my credit score remained. A score I'd worked so hard to build since college destroyed by my own parents. My parents didn't think I'd go through with it. They thought the family card would trump everything. They were wrong. When they received official notice that they were being investigated for multiple felonies, their tone changed. Suddenly, they wanted to work something out. My dad called my uncle asking him to talk some sense into me. They even tried to get my grandparents to intervene, but to their credit, my grandparents stood firm saying legal consequences were appropriate. 3 months of legal battles later, my parents were facing serious charges. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged signatures didn't remotely match mine. The accounts were clearly opened without my knowledge, and the truck title transfer was blatantly fraudulent. They didn't have a leg to stand on legally. They took a plea deal, no jail time, but 5 years probation, mandatory financial counseling, and most importantly, full restitution. They had to pay back every penny they'd stolen, plus the full value of my truck, plus legal fees. All told, they owed me just over $80,000. Where would they get that money? I didn't know and didn't care. They'd have to figure it out. Maybe sell their house, cash in retirement accounts, borrow from relatives they hadn't alienated yet. Not my problem. Dylan's fancy wedding got canceled. Amber made the wise decision to bail on him. Dylan blamed me for this, of course, sending occasional texts about how I'd ruined his big day. I just laughed and felt happy for Amber. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number and focused on my career. The only family I stayed in touch with were my grandparents and the uncle who helped me with the legal stuff. The rest could think whatever they wanted. I was done explaining myself or seeking approval from people who didn't have my best interests at heart. The legal resolution took nearly a year to finalize. By the time it was done, I was emotionally exhausted, but financially vindicated. I used the restitution money to clear the remaining fraudulent debt and invested the rest. Between that and a promotion at work that came through around the same time, I was finally building the life I deserved. My credit score was still recovering, but with all the fraudulent accounts removed and perfect payment history going forward, it would eventually return to where it had been. More importantly, I put extensive credit freezes and monitoring in place to ensure nothing like this could ever happen again. There were nights I lay awake questioning if I'd done the right thing. Was pursuing legal action against my own parents going too far? Should I have tried harder to work things out privately? Was I, as some relatives suggested, being vindictive rather than seeking justice? But then I'd remember how casually they'd announced selling my truck. How they'd used my identity for years without remorse. How they'd prioritized Dylan's wants over my fundamental rights. I knew I'd made the only choice I could live with. By the 1-year anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving, I was in a completely different place. New apartment, new job title, new outlook on life and family. I had learned the hard way that DNA doesn't guarantee loyalty or love, that sometimes the healthiest family is the one you choose for yourself. As for my parents, I heard through family members that they were struggling financially after having to pay me back. I couldn't care less. 2 years later, it's been a while since I shared my story about my folks selling my truck and the identity theft mess I discovered. Some of you wanted an update, so here's what's happened. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm absolutely crushing it. The restitution money the court forced my parents to pay, I invested half of it in a fintech startup that developed a payment processing app, which my accountant uncle told me about. The company got bought out 6 months ago and my investment tripled. Between that windfall, working hard at my job and 2 promotions, I bought myself a Tesla Model 3. Definitely a massive upgrade from my old truck. It's the first brand new car I've ever owned. Every time I hit that acceleration, it reminds me that cutting my toxic family out was 100% the right call. My credit score is back up to 790 after being in the toilet. It took almost 2 years of perfect payments and time for all those fraudulent inquiries to drop off. I check it religiously now and keep freezes on my credit reports. Nobody's ever touching my finances again. I haven't spoken to my parents or Dylan in those 2 years. Complete radio silence. My grandpa keeps me updated though. Turns out, there were some sweet consequences for their actions. After the court case wrapped up, my parents became local pariahs. The judge made them pay full restitution plus damages, totaling around $60,000. They also got 5 years probation and had to attend financial counseling sessions that my uncle said were basically don't steal a 101. The cherry on top? My dad had to come out of early retirement and take a low-paying job at half his old salary. They had to sell their suburban 4-bedroom house and downsize to a crappy condo in the bad part of town. Dylan moved in with them because, surprise, he still can't hold down a job longer than a few months. Most of their friends ditched them after the whole ordeal. I was doing my thing, living my best life, building my career. Then, last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my mom calling from someone else's phone since I blocked all their numbers. She was crying about how they needed help. Dad had health problems. Insurance wasn't covering everything. They were about to lose the condo. Dylan lost his job again. Blah blah blah. Could I please bail them out just this once? I told her I'd think about it and hung up. I thought about it for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to drive over. Not to help, but to finally say what needed to be said. I pulled up in my Tesla and sat there for a minute, watching them peek through the blinds. Mom was the only one with the guts to come outside. She walked up with hopeful eyes, probably thinking my nice car meant I was there to save the day. She started with the classic guilt trips. We're still your parents. Family sticks together. And my personal favorite, we've learned our lesson. I rolled the window down just enough to talk. I came to give you some advice, I said. The same advice you gave me my entire life when I needed help. Figure it out yourself. She tried the your father could die angle. There are resources, I told her. Government programs, payment plans, charities, all the same stuff I would have had to use if I hadn't fought to get back what you stole from me. Start there. Dylan came out pounding on my window yelling, "You're such a jerk. You think you look cool showing up with some Tesla while refusing to help your family?" I replied, "Oh, yes, I do look cool." Then I said, "I just came to say good luck figuring things out. Keep trying. I believe in you." I drove away watching Dylan lose it in the rearview mirror. Good. Is everything perfect now? No. I still have moments where I wish I had normal parents. Father's Day commercials still hit different. But those moments get rarer as time passes. Bottom line for anyone reading this, you're allowed to walk away from people who hurt you even if they're family. Especially if they're family. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to steal your truck, your identity, or your peace of mind. For those asking if I'll ever consider helping them, the answer is a big fat no. For the few people messaging me saying I'm being a jerk, try getting defrauded and robbed by your family. No, I don't think so.